Oh, it's good to be with you. Yes.
I
I've
miss
been,
you. I feel like I've been
oh,
on climbing a mountain and haven't like been I've been to the bottom of the ocean and haven't had time to come up for air.
oh, yeah. I think a lot of us are feeling that way. I just think there are so many energies coming in that, I just think a lot of us are feeling different things like that we've been working hard, that we're at times tired, and, all kinds of things that are going on now. I mean, there's just so much more energy coming in, and we're heading into 3 big months of energy and what some have talked about waves of
Right.
energy.
And
Yeah.
the equinox is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
That's a biggie.
That's indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just it's very exciting and it's great to be here and um, great to get to be together. And so, hi everybody, hi. Sorry for the little bits at the beginning of trying to get things straight, but here we are. Yay!
Yay, we made it. And I'm so excited to hear your story. I'm very curious and we've never discussed it before.
I
So
know we really haven't. And the longer I am, the longer I'm living this human experience, the more the story changes. That's incredible. If I had told my story, I don't know, some years ago, it would have been a very different story. And I used to hear people say that, and I just thought it sounded really like a bunch of intellectual blah blah blah, but it really is true. It really is true.
right.
So, well, okay. So, where to begin? I want to be
Introduce yourself.
okay. Well, I'm Debbie Hazelton, and I'm an inspirational speaker, a healing practitioner, holistic practitioner. I try not to say healing in some ways. I try to watch certain words so that all the different professions don't raise their eyebrows and go, what? But holistic or healing practitioner. I've done, I was a mental health professional, licensed mental health professional for over 30 years, and a licensed massage therapist for over 15. I've been ordained as a minister since 91 and an author of 2 books that were out there in bookstores. I was noticing that again the other day. I saw something about how, yeah, those 2 books were in B. Dalton and Walden bookstores.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I've just been on an incredible journey of discovering, and I think that it's been a real mission for me to kind of uncover or discover a lot of things and then find a way to bring that out to others to help other people find a way and find meaning, find words, find freedom, all kinds of things. So that's a lot of who I am right now. I mean, who I am today, what I've been, what's brought me to here. I'm a child of God. I'm an expression of Source. All those things.
That's beautiful. I love that. Oh, I felt that right in my heart.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's what means so much to me. I mean, that really is what just fuels me and keeps me going every day. I mean, it really.
Right, right. You literally become a different person when you wake up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel, in different ways every day. I feel like I'm, further waking and further trusting this process, and trusting Source and the team that I feel I'm a part of, just trusting and going for this incredible ride.
Absolutely. And just when you think you can't grow or expand anymore, boom, you grow again. You go up another level and you're like, whoa.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah.
So did you grow up religious? Were you in a religious household?
Um, Really, I grew up spiritual, but I was not in a religious household. My mom did her best to make sure that there was some religious education, but it kind of came about in funny ways. I asked a lot of questions, but I remember, being encouraged to pray before going to bed at night, and a lot of that was also God bless to, the list of people that I knew, or the list of people they wanted me to get to know, of relatives. And it was good. It was a good way, God bless mommy, daddy, God bless all these different people. And then we did not pray for meals. The only meals we prayed for, well, in school, but also for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I remember mom and dad, saying who's going to say grace. And it was always just those 2 days out of the year. And I remember being sad that it was only those 2 days out of the year, and pretending that I didn't want to do it, because my sister would always say she didn't want to do it. So I would think, well, I'm not supposed to pretend that I want to do it, or that I'm supposed to pretend I don't want to do it. And so, then from time to time I would have the opportunity, and I always felt something very strong about wanting to do that and liking to do that. And then I was asking questions. I remember even in my crib trying to hear God's voice.
Wow.
And isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And I remember being outside and reaching up, wondering if I could touch heaven, and asking a lot of questions about heaven and the angels. And I used to imagine sitting up on the edge of heaven next to, Jesus and God. And I think I imagined it like it was some kind of a loft, so that I could sit up there with my legs hanging off. And, and I always imagined the angels singing "Deck the Halls." That was what I always imagined them
So
singing.
You had a knowing then, a familiarity.
Yeah. And I remember asking, does God wear shoes? I wanted to be able to hear if he, at that time was more of a he, if he was, coming down the hall or anything. I want to know if he wore shoes. And I remember my mom and dad saying yes, because Jesus wore sandals, but they didn't really explain all that. And yeah. I would ask questions about how it rains and how it snows, and my dad would say, well, there's this little machine, and God turns the crank and makes it rain or snow. And at that time I bought it.
That's so cute.
I remember sitting in the living room floor. I think I was about 4, and I remember touching my arm and asking, what is myself? What is myself? I just thought that was very interesting to wonder. And when I was 8, I had this notion come to me that it would make much more sense, because by then I had an uncle that had died when I was 6, and they said, oh, he went to heaven. And I remember thinking a lot about death, and I remember coming up with, I thought I invented this great idea that we would live over and over again, and it would be less waste.
Wow.
And I said, and God would make it so that we wouldn't remember, so that we would live now. I got that. I mean, wow. That's just incredible.
That is incredible.
I told my mom one day, and she said, oh yeah, that's reincarnation. I'm like, what is that big word? She said, and she said, people in India believe that they're really primitive. And I remember saying, well, I don't know, they may be primitive, but that sure sounds smart to me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, because her mind couldn't conceive of that. She wasn't.
No, she wasn't. She was a younger soul than me. And
right. Wow.
Yeah, I really feel that. But, she was looking into it a lot more as her life progressed, and still believing that, that nobody came back so far to tell us that there was life after death. And I used to say, well, you wouldn't believe them if they did. And there are people who have come back and you don't believe them.
Yeah, you think they're primitive.
Yeah.
They are telling you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Wow, that's so funny. How crazy that the people that we grow up with are either like they just show us they're the contrast that we need, just the level that we need to
Oh, yeah.
to like reaffirm our beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. They really do us a favor in a lot of ways by not going along with us so that we strive harder. I mean, there is that perspective that, yeah. And toward the end, my mom and my stepfather both really, I think, were turning to me because they knew that they were going into the spirit world and they knew that I believed in that. And so there was a definite connection with each of them before they left. And, every now and then my dad himself would refer to God. And, there would be some aspect of his expression that would be about that. But, we went to Sunday school, we went to church from time to time, but not that regularly. I didn't like Sunday school. I thought it was busy work. And I loved being inside churches, but there was often an ambivalence for me with it. And I realized toward the end of my mom's life, she told me that she really believed that religion was to instill moral conscience, and that for a long time in her life, she really wasn't a believer. But I think toward the end, she did believe more. And she would often say when somebody died, well, they've gone to a better place. But she would use prayer and other things like that to control us. I mean, something with my sister happened once, and she said, did you, do this or do that, or you did this wrong? And she said, well, God's punishing you. Well, with me one time she used that. I was afraid of a thunderstorm, and she said, have you been saying your prayers? And I said, no. And she said, well, God's punishing you.
Whoa.
So, ooh.
Wow. And did you buy it? Did you believe it?
No, I really didn't. But I remember there were times that I really was afraid. I was afraid of God, and I was afraid. I had some very strange things that I think, it's taken me a long time to kind of come to terms with. I was often afraid of electronics. I didn't know why, but I was afraid of, remember I'd gotten a talking book player, and I knew that, you weren't supposed to touch it with wet hands. And so I was afraid of, I knew somehow, before anybody had ever told me, I knew that I was afraid of electric shock. But more than that, I was afraid of sounds. Like if there was something wrong with the TV, I would cover my ears. Certain sounds would frighten me. And when I got my talking book player, I would imagine all kinds of things about recorded history. And even later, when I heard about the Akashic records, I was often afraid that a lot of things out of recorded history would just come tumbling into my head, and it was overwhelming. So I was kind of claustrophobic about recorded things, and scared that something would take them over, and that I would hear all this stuff. And I used to play with energy when I was little. Before I was really afraid, I used to play with things to see if the universe was like alive, or I felt like everything was alive. And I felt like I wanted to see if I was going to get feedback from things. So whether I was touching things, and even that whole thing about if I was going to get an electric shock, or if the universe was going to be kind to me, I felt like every day had a texture. Wow. I felt like I would get in the kitchen and I would spin and spin and spin at the back of my chair where I sat at the table. And I would spin because I knew I could feel the room tilting when I would do that, like the centrifugal force. But
Yeah.
I would spin, and I would wonder, is because I felt like the room was really spinning, and I wanted to know if anything moved on the other side of the room. And I swear one day I did that spinning thing and I stopped and something moved on the other side of the table. And I was like,
Wow.
wow,
You're like, I
something,
knew
I
it.
know. So, I was always kind of experimenting. And yet at times, like I said, I really was afraid. I was afraid of thunder and afraid of what God might be, or, and at other times I was very, very trusting. So it's just a real mixed bag of a lot of that stuff.
Right, but sometimes I think because we're so little, maybe we label it as fear, but maybe it's kind of like that feeling. Well, I don't know if you get it, but I get it about the ocean, where it's so massive that you just have this respect.
Yes,
Or kind
yeah.
of like the principal. The principal is like a big deal or something, and there's just this respect, the level of respect.
Uh-huh.
God,
Yeah.
level of respect, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe others could call it fear, but maybe it was the respect, the magnitude of the enormity of it.
I think it was both, because I think, I mean, for one thing, I didn't do well with authority figures.
Right.
And, and for another, yeah, I remember in my college years, I told another friend of mine who wrote poetry that I had this image of the ocean being like large arms rocking us. And I would walk by the water, and even now, if I walk by the ocean, I just become enthralled with the wonderment of all the activity going on in the ocean, and how it goes on day after day after day, and the ocean waves keep happening day after day, and all the life that's in there. And yet I would never, I can remember also being afraid of being out in the ocean ever alone, and never wanted that to happen. And I wonder if I drowned at some point, because
Right.
I can feel what that must be like. And when I learned about a tidal wave, I mean, it was like I knew what it was. And when I learned
Wow. It's
about
like you were picking up
earthquakes,
a
like
past
I knew.
life.
Huh?
Mhm. You were like dipping into one of your past lives.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of times it's like I knew what an earthquake was, and I would envision it before anybody gave me the word for it. And when they told me what prostitution was, I felt like I knew, and it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
a
Mhm.
lot of things like that, and I remember just feeling so intensely when different messages or images or words like about things like that would come up, and it was like I knew. Now I haven't always pinned them to exact memories. I have some, but still, wow, just intense stuff. And I think all of that though is where we live. I think that all of us, whether we're conscious of it or not, we bring so much with us into this life and into our experiences. So, it's just with an incredible appreciation today that I affirm that.
Wow, yeah, and it's a soul recognition. Your
Mhm.
soul recognizes those pieces of you. So it's like even though you have a bunch of stuff in your bag, remember, and you're like, oh, there's my favorite chapstick or whatever. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean it ever went anywhere just because you forgot about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So can you feel energy in items? Because
Oh
when
yeah,
you
I've done
say that,
psychometry. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That's really
so you know
incredible.
how I don't know if you've ever heard of these crazy shows. There's these weird shows called My Strange Addiction, and then they show like these people that are like weird, and this guy's in love with his car, and he's always washing it and stroking it and all this weird stuff, like to the extreme, right? So the nth
Mhm, mhm.
degree weirdos or whatever. But I have always had a thing where I talk to my cars, and the cars that I've had. And it didn't happen until the year before I woke up that I started doing
Ah,
that. And I started talking to my car, and I would talk to it like, hello, and thank you, and I appreciate you, and like kind of like a pet, and
yeah,
like just taking care of it and cleaning it and just really appreciating it and feeling like the appreciation back for me,
yes,
real noticing, like, thank you for noticing that I take care of you, and thank you for noticing that I get you safely everywhere you need to go, and like, you know, like
yeah.
that recognition. And has that
Hmm.
ever happened to you? Because I
Oh
thought
yeah.
nuts when
Oh
I was
yeah.
doing it, and nobody knows that, so now everybody knows. But I don't care.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I was playing with energy, it being alive and testing, and at times feeling the, like almost like a thickness in the air and a thinness in the air and all kinds of things that I would play with, but also playing with, getting feedback and asking questions, and certainly talking to everything. And when they talked later about, plants and having feeling and all that, I was like, yeah, I get that. And I remember getting the sense that my cats and dogs that I was growing up with, that they had conversations that we couldn't hear, but they were communicating. i just
Right.
i just knew that.
Yeah.
I just knew it. So
Wow,
very
that's
interesting.
amazing.
Yeah, but just like everyone, I mean, that doesn't mean that I was always spiritually conscious or always connected to that, or that I wasn't in the field, so to speak, not having all kinds of human experiences and forgetting and being irresponsible, or being, not always, certainly not always nice, not always kind, not always appreciative. I mean, I definitely spent a ton of time, and I mean, I still spend my time in the human field of it all. And I think, I just think that's what we came to do. And then to gradually bring the spiritual, as we wake up more and more, to bring the spiritual into our expression and all of that. But I just think, there were times that I would become more spiritual. I'd have an experience and I'd think, okay, I'm going to hold on now. I'm going to remember this and I'm going to stay with it. And then, I would just forget and go back out there and do all kinds of silly things. So, it's
Right,
just
right.
part of the journey.
Right. And I think that that's part of our contract, so to speak, that
Hmm.
that source, God, wants to know what would it be like to be Debbie and to
Hmm.
have this life, to play this character in this movie. What would it be like? And so you have to have those human experiences, not only to learn from, but so that you can have empathy for others, because then you
Oh, yeah.
remember what it's like.
I think empathy is one of our absolute greatest gifts, greatest tools. Absolutely. Yeah. That is for sure. And yeah. And yeah, I mean, uh, boy, I had a particular thought and I don't remember it, but maybe it'll come back. Um, but yeah, I mean, I really think that um, we do go through things to get that empathy for sure, and to be able to give that to others. And they may not even know it. It may be that we give it just in being kind and not biting somebody's head off, you
Wow.
know?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It can come in varying shades and degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And but not everybody does it though. Like, just because you have the capacity, or if you feel it within yourself, you feel empathetic towards someone's situation or whatever they're going through. Um, Sometimes we're too afraid for
Yeah.
whatever reason to act out on it, to act on it.
Afraid, or too ego driven. I mean, I can definitely remember when I just wanted to be right. And I'm like, I what might have said even an hour before, well, yes, I want to be loving and let the ego go or put it aside, not let it, rule. And then I'd get into a situation, maybe an hour later and feel righteous,
Right.
and like, oh, well, this is an exception. I'm holding on to this and I'm going to fight for this,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
it happens less and less and less. It happens, because I find myself saying, okay, source, yes, spirit, you lead the way. Okay, my team. Okay, I know you've got me and I've got you. And the more I do that, the easier it gets and the less of that kind of temptation that I have. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's your perspective and your it's like you're opening the door and allowing source to help you, because I think we block it with the ego and those dark thoughts. It's like so you're turning off the light switch and you're like, okay, well, the switch is there, you can turn it on if you want to.
Right. And there were times I did not want to,
Right.
like, okay, enough of this stuff. I just want to be right, or I just want to be indulging, or I just want to be, any of what I thought I wanted. And, I'll get back to that later. I mean, there were times that
Right, I'll be good
I'm
tomorrow.
very willful, very, very willful. Part of my survival, though. I mean, it really was a part of my survival. My mother had dealt with, I believe, 5 stillborns and miscarriages.
Wow.
And she adopted my sister. Her husband, my father, was a violent alcoholic. And so I think even early she was dealing with abuse. And so she got pregnant with me when they went to a Kentucky Derby, and she forgot to bring her diaphragm, and she wasn't planning on getting pregnant anymore. And so I really am sure that he gave her, he was mad at her, and she probably was mad at herself. She forgot her diaphragm, and I teased her later. I said, well, see, that's what you get for horsing around.
I love that.
But she knew, they told her, all the other babies had died. She had been given, I think it was radium for excessive bleeding, and she could not carry a baby full term. And
Wow.
so, and I had a hypnosis, or a spontaneous kind of thing come to me. Like I could remember being in that womb and feeling like it was just not, it wasn't strong enough to support me.
Wow.
Her babies just came out, early and died.
Wow.
Well, I she felt I was going to live from the beginning. She believed that I was. And they thought I was a boy because I was so active. And at 6 months and 1 week, she went into labor. Now, I think all but the first one were cesarean. Well, some of the miscarriages just ended.
Right.
But so anyway, I had to be a cesarean. And because all the others had died, they cut her open with no anesthesia.
What? Ouch.
Oh
Why?
my God. They were afraid that anything they gave her would kill the baby, kill me.
Did she talk about how painful that must have been?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And she said
Oh,
that when they got me to cry, that's when they said knock her out. She told that story a lot, and then they let her go to sleep once they heard me cry.
wow.
So then I was 2'5", 2 pounds 5 ounces,
You're
16 inches
tiny.
long. Yeah. And so I was in an isolette for almost 3 months. They called me the Ike baby. I was born the day Eisenhower was elected and 2 minutes before the polls closed. So I said, well, I don't know whether I got here in time to vote or somebody voted for me.
Wow.
And I was brought home on Inauguration Day. How weird is that?
Wow. I
So
wonder if
that
that's one of your lifetimes. I wonder if
Well,
it came to you
I
somehow.
don't know, but it took that long to get to weigh 5 pounds, and I swear I remember being in that isolette. I remember those bright lights, and I they had to reach in with gloves on to take care of me. And I have said, boy, that was a long meditation. You know, my mother couldn't, my mother couldn't hold me. Really, she came every day and talked to me, but they cared for me in that box from, you know,
Wow.
November 4th to January 20th, and then they they took me home. But by then they had given me too much oxygen to keep me alive. I had 1 in 1,000 chances of living 12 hours. There's the willfulness.
Wow. You are
There's the
a
willful.
miracle.
Yeah, and definitely willful I was, you know. I mean, oh man. So, you know, once I came home, I wouldn't eat. I wasn't eating very well at all. And my mom said my dad was just screaming and yelling. So I came right home into that alcoholic environment, that violent environment, you know.
Wow.
So, you know, and it was foreign to me because even though I was in that box, I probably had some security, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So but they found shortly after that that I was blind from the too much oxygen. And there are people who sued for that and won. I never felt like doing that, but there are some who did way back then.
Wow. I wonder how oxygen. Wow. That's
It
interesting.
Yeah, it burns blood vessels and it disconnected the optic nerve from the brain. They
Oh.
say they don't know how to tie the optic nerve into the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I'm waiting for the Mandela effect to make to make it happen. But you know, I used to never really say, "Oh yeah, I would want to see." I used to, because everybody wanted me to say that. I
Yeah.
purposely would say, no, no, I'm, you know, not going to say that. But a few years ago, I started to say, okay, I've had enough of this blindness stuff. You know, I've had enough of this.
Yeah. I want to see what the hype's all
Yeah,
about seeing.
but I feel like I know. I feel like I know. I mean, I don't know. People have asked me, do you see in your dreams? I just know things. I just go into knowing. Um, but I feel, at the same time, I used to feel overwhelmed when I would imagine, like if there was a procedure they could do and I would wake up from it, would it be too scary? Would it be really overwhelming? I don't
Wow.
know, but I would do it now. You know, I would do it.
You're
And
a
you know,
different person now, though.
I'm a very different person. I remember in my teens, I was away at school. I was standing in the kitchen, and I didn't even think this was weird at the time, but I had this kind of voice, not really a voice that I heard with my ears, but I knew it was talking to me in my head. And it said, blindness is your uniform. It's what you agreed to wear in this lifetime to do your work, but it's not the bottom line to who you are. And I just said, oh, okay.
Okay. That's
Okay.
butter.
But, you know, there are times I'm like, okay, I've had enough of this uniform. You know, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready to drive. I'm ready to fly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I don't even want the, you know, the plane to do it. I mean, I used to think about flying all the time as a kid, you know,
Wow.
imagine all kinds of stuff like that. So, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of us, because with you saying that, I mean, we could say that about a lot of things, not just blind people, but like poverty. You could say that about being a woman, how we have certain, like, oh, you can't do
Beautiful.
that because you're a woman, or you can't do that because you're a mother, or you can't do that
Oh,
because you're too old or too
yeah.
young,
Yeah.
or, you know, so many limitations.
My mom told me, you live in a sighted world and you live in a man's world. And I said no to both. And I said, if that were true, I wouldn't be here.
Exactly. We create our own. You decide, I believe.
Exactly.
You decide it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Those are
Yeah.
her limitations.
Yeah. Well, you know, and there certainly was a lot that she worked hard to teach me, as hard as it was. I mean, my poor mother, she's a Libra. She was a Libra, and I'm a Scorpio. So imagine how hard it
Oh
was
my
for
goodness, the
her to teach
Scorpio,
me.
so psychic.
Yeah.
And then in the
Well,
zodiac wheel, you're higher than her.
And stubborn. Oh man, I
Yeah.
mean, I was certainly stubborn. But you know, I had a lot of people, and even today, I have a lot of people who assume they know what I should be able to do and not. And if I lived by what they thought, there are a lot of things I do that they would not I would not be doing, you know. I mean, I have done a lot of things that other people would assume I can't or shouldn't. At the same time, there were plenty of times that I, you know, played that blindness card, you know, because I didn't want to have to do things. But my
That's so
but
true. I've done that too. I played the woman card because I didn't want
yeah,
to.
but you know, she had to work very hard. And even for me today, there's a balance. There are times when I definitely need to listen. Well, probably more of the time, I need to just listen and then decide. Listen and really take time to hear and then think about before I make a snap decision. Uh, and then I may not do what other people are thinking or wanting. And there are other times when I will. And I don't necessarily place people who have vision above me, although there are times I've had to learn that people who can see are not necessarily smarter or better at or, you know, more capable of this or that, a lot of things. So, you
Right,
know,
right.
it's an ongoing balance. It's an ongoing process of learning.
Right. I love that. That's so true. You're absolutely right. I love that thing about listening. I think we all need to do that,
Yeah.
myself included. Listen more. I remember when I was talking to you, I was so excited after our first conversation. And I told my son, JJ, he's 12. And
Mhm.
I told him I had that how we connected and we just feel like we've known each other forever. And he said, wow, she's magical. That's what he said about you. So he's a big
Oh, well,
fan.
that's sweet. You know what? There's a part of me that would say, oh, I don't know how magical I am. And then I think we all are. We are all so magical. We go, you know, we humans live through and survive so much stuff. And we often don't know what the tools are going in. I mean, imagine even coming into this world and trying to figure out how to make sense out of it. And then with so many things about where we come into, the environments in which we, you know, live, and then, you know, as life just continues to progress, we have to make sense out of that ourselves. It's a very private journey. And yeah, many people will watch others and pattern the behavior after, but that doesn't mean that everybody is really on the same page
Right.
inside with what it means and what it feels like, looks like, how they experience it. And so as we live in the world and be in it, not of it necessarily, but as we do, you know, I mean, the things that we learn to move through and move with and how we go about it, I think life is filled with magic. Our relationships, how we meet people, how we play, how we learn about praying, you know, just a bunch of things are magical.
Wow, that's so true. And seeing everything as a gift, not
Yeah.
as a curse.
Oh
Even if
gosh,
it's
yeah.
yucky, it's helping you somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. What events led to your awakening then?
Well, like I said, I was spiritual, but I was struggling and, you know, all that. Um, I was very fortunate when I went. I was going to non-denom well, no, let's see. I was going to church here and there. I remember I got confirmed when I think I was 13. I got baptized. My mother did not have me baptized as a kid. And so I was very enthralled, very moved by being in the church. And I had my first part of the Braille Bible. And I just, you know, was really into all of that. And but there was always, like I said, a part of me that was questioning a lot of stuff. So when I went into seventh grade, I had a resource teacher, Jean Stanley, Mrs. Stanley, And she worked with all the blind kids in the school. There were 3 of us. We were at Nova High. There were 3 of us, and then as time went on, there were, I think it got up to 7, and we had different teachers. But Jean Stanley was a science of mind person who believed in metaphysics. They called it religious science, science of mind. Now they call it Centers for Spiritual Living, but very much new thought. So she and I used to have a lot of really deep discussions. And I remember telling her, you know, I really believe God comes to us in different forms. And, you know, we were definitely sharing a lot of that. And then when I was in undergraduate college, I had this friend in my dorm who said, Deb, I really want you to come to my church. Well, by then I had gone to different interfaith, non-denominational churches, and still was there, and then for a while, and then moved on, and didn't really, by then I was tired of organized religion. And so my friend said, I want you to come to my church. And I said, oh, I don't know. And then I had my radio on, and it was on throughout the night. And for some crazy reason, I was listening to that dentist office kind of music, you know, that elevator music.
Right.
And there were these little and things that would come on, public service announcements, that would say the word for today is, and it would give the word and a beautiful thought. And then it would say, this is brought to you by Unity, and to get a copy of our thoughts, write to Unity Village. So I listened to them. I keep my radio on all night because I wanted to wake up and hear them. I thought they were so beautiful. I wrote, and they came, 3 months worth came on my birthday. And I went to this friend of mine. He said he came to wish me happy birthday. And he was the one that was trying to get me to go to his church. And he said, you know, I came to wish you a happy birthday. I said, let me show you these things. And I showed him, and he said, Deb, that's my church. That's Unity. I know. So I was blown away. So I started going to Unity. This was 1976. And I was moved. And I got very close to the minister and his wife, Charles and Betty Lely. And I just really loved it. But even then, I thought, I wonder, you know, why are they referring to us as Unity students? And like, you know, are they really serious about all this stuff? I mean, there was a part of me that still I was loving it, but I was skeptical.
No, you're playing devil's advocate. Yeah.
I was what?
Like playing devil's advocate?
Yeah,
like,
playing devil's advocate. Yeah. And I think I found out later that I was going between the reverent and the rhetoric, that I wanted the reverence, but I didn't want the rhetoric. So I still love Unity. And I always wanted, well, in 1980, I suddenly got the message that everything I was really about, writing and speaking and counseling and everything, would fit under the ministry umbrella. And
wow.
So I got to do that, but I still didn't want to totally give over, even to Unity. Mm-hmm. And so I was, you know, kind of going along and still feeling that. But in the 90s, gosh, I wrote 2 books that came out, and I mentioned that earlier. Mm-hmm. And then I found a way to get ordained through Universal Brotherhood. I didn't want them to be Brotherhood, but that was their thing. That was what Rick and Janai Prigmore had named it. And it was a way of ordaining people who felt individually led to being a minister.
Wow.
And I liked it better than Universal Life because there was a spiritual process of moving into that. I still had to do some things rather than just sign up and pay my money. I still had to do some things for them. And so I got ordained, and I've kept that, and went on in 1999 rather, I felt called to be a massage therapist. And so I added that, and I realized after I added that part of why I added that was I was already a Reiki master, and it was important to be licensed in the state of Florida in order to do Reiki. So, you know, I was like, being guided. I was. And and I have another experience about my awakening I want to tell, but I want to tell you this other really synchronistic experience. I started having guide dogs in 71. I had a shepherd named Heidi, Heidi. It didn't work out. She had something wrong with her, and the school gave me a choice about whether to take her. Even at, when I was in the school, I don't know that they should have given me that choice, but I was devoted already, even in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, I'll take her. Well, it wasn't long before I knew that she really did have this problem. So a couple of months later, I was back at the school and I got a lab, and her name was Cindy. Now, Cindy was a great dog and she worked wonderfully, but they didn't train us enough in Florida Travel. That was Michigan, and Florida Travel is very different. And I was young. I was selfish. I didn't like everybody wanting to talk about the dog. I still don't really like. I still get old, but I was not always balancing. What the dog. I mean, some of my stuff got taken out on the dog, and some I wasn't consistently loving. But anyway, I had Cindy for 3 years, and then I went on to finish more of my college, and I left Cindy with my mom and M, short for Emerson, my stepfather. At that time, they were married, and so they took care of Cindy. I'm saying Lindy, you'll know why in a minute. But they took care of Cindy, and they loved her, and they kept her until she died. Well, I thought at that point, like, no, I don't want another dog. It didn't work out. I just decided, no, I don't want to do it. I waited 13 years, and I was going to a chiropractor who used crystals to work with people. And I had incredible intuitive experiences when he would use these crystals. He would pile crystals on me and put and all around me and put a blanket on me and leave me for an hour.
Wow.
And it was so intense, and he was very psychic. So a day after I went to him one time, I had this strong image to go sit down and meditate. And as soon as I did, I got this message. It said, you need to go and get another guide dog. And I went, what?
Wow.
And it said, you really need to do this. It'll be more important for you. You're going to be out there more speaking and doing things as a professional woman, and you need to have another dog. This was in the mid 80s, about 87. And I started to recite my little list about why I didn't want to do it. And the message said, that little list of yours has gotten old.
Wow.
You really need this new information. And I went, wow, okay. So I called a friend of mine who had had a bad experience with a dog, because I thought she'd talk me into my senses. And she said, well, it's funny that you bring this up, because I've been thinking about getting another dog too. And there's this new school on the west coast of Florida. I kept getting a sense that there was a new school where they were more able to deal with professional people and all of that. And she said, there's this new school, and a bunch of us are going over in a couple of weeks, and we have room in the car for one more person if you want to go.
Wow, you manifested that.
Isn't that incredible? So the whole time I'm going, why am I doing this? This is so weird. I don't really know if I like dogs that much anymore. I didn't want to do this. And I kept going because I feel guided. And so I went to the school. By then I had already called and talked to the director a couple of times. I went over there and I thought, oh, these people sound so silly talking to their dogs this much. And at the same time, I just knew that spiritually I was led to do this. So by January of 88, I was in class. And again, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? But then again, I know I'm supposed to do this. Mm-hmm. So the dog I got was a cross between the first two.
Wow.
She was a shepherd lab, and she had the names that were combined. She had the D.I. of Heidi, and her name was Lindy, that rhymed with Cindy. It was Lyndi.
Wow.
And I knew, I mean, that was such a message, such a gift for me. Can you imagine what an incredible moment? So I knew that I was, definitely guided, and it did a lot to wake me up. I was still, very stubborn and a lot of things. I still did a lot of what I call research. I call life experience research. I was still out there in the field doing tons of research with, stupid relationships. I mean, picking
Yeah.
wrong people. You know that one, don't you? Yeah. Picking the wrong people. And I call them scrap people. I refer to scrap people like scrap paper,
Oh, wow.
make
Yeah.
my mark and learn, and then kind of toss that one away. And today I view it a little differently, with much more thanksgiving, but and much more appreciation and love for all of those people. But anyway, went on and majored in psych, and did a lot with humanistic psych and my spirituality still. But the real big experience was near the end of 2011. Like many, I was eager for 2012, and I was having a lot of different experiences with a couple of people of learning, more about who I was, and, working through issues around relationships and all kinds of stuff. And so I had gone to see this other friend of mine, and we would trade. I would do EFT, and she would do healing on me using the body talk system. I learned that system too. And she would do, she was a medical intuitive. She would do quantum touch on me. And she asked me a bunch of questions one day, and just said, I feel like you need to just talk. And so I talked about nothing really. But all of a sudden I came out of there and I said, oh my God, I have been thinking about what I don't choose and not enough about what I choose.
Wow.
Oh my God. I went home and I was sitting on my couch and I said, okay, Spirit, what is my purpose? And I thought, you know what your purpose is. Why are you asking this silly question? You've been down this road so many times. And I'm like, still, I need to hear it right now. What's my purpose? And the answer came, to inspire. And I'm like, well, I know that too. And yeah, I know that's true. And Spirit said, well, or whoever said, if you know that, then it's time that you start being nicer to people.
Wow.
And you need to live, with greater consistency between what you know and how you are in the world and what you're doing and all that. And I'm like, okay. And I felt like I accepted it differently. Like I really took it like accepted a different role on that day. It was, really powerful. And I have not looked back. I mean, I'm not saying I don't ever have a tough day or anything. And I never make mistakes. Of course I do. But wow, I've been forever changed from that day, that moment. And it just gets better and better and better. I feel like I wake up, I'm downloading. I feel like I'm shown things in my dreams that, further show me who I don't want to be, and how important it is to just keep being available, and certainly being loving, and having empathy, and wow,
Yeah, and to be responsible. I think that like even in my law enforcement career, like I always thought, oh, I don't want to be the supervisor. I don't want to be the one in charge, because that's a big responsibility, and I just want to do the fun stuff and not have to wear that heavy crown of responsibility, But it's like once you accept the crown, then you have to be responsible.
Yeah, and to me, responsible is really response-able and responsibility. And as I am willing to be, I find I get all the help I need to do that. And I've been I've been privileged. When I moved, I ended up leaving Atlanta. I was living in Atlanta from 2012 to 2014, and before that I was in Orlando, and always marvelous people, marvelous opportunities. But when I was in Atlanta, the place where the place where I lived sold, and I have a longtime friend, Desmond Clark, who we had been very close years before and had lived together. And I knew she was going through a lot, and I knew her father had Alzheimer's. I knew she had lost her mother, and I knew she had a really big house. And I knew she was alone basically in that big house, except for dealing with her dad. And her brother at that time did not live here. He was a couple hours away. So she said, come if you want and stay as long as you like. Well, that was over 4 years ago. I'm still here.
Wow.
But I knew I was going to change a lot. I knew I was going to grow a lot. And I didn't feel like I was looking forward to some of that. I knew I was going to deal with a lot of, they are a Black family. And I knew that the father looked at me and only saw blindness.
Mm-hmm.
But I also knew, and I knew he was going to try to feed my dog. I knew he was going to try, he was going to let her out, and I didn't want him to. And I knew I was going to be frustrated with all that. And at the same time, I knew I was needed. And so it was like asking Spirit, okay, what's my next assignment? I knew I was needed. I knew Des had some health challenges, and she has since, and she's doing really well now. But I knew, and so I was given the privilege to help take care of their dad, who and ended up dying this year of Alzheimer's, and to be trusted, and I wasn't always nice, even in that. None of us were always nice, and so we've all had to forgive ourselves. But it also made me become much more compassionate for all the people that were not always nice or helpful in the way I needed them to be with me, or all the people who were just very ordinary and weren't always impressive, and all kinds of things. It taught me about ordinariness and extraordinariness. And so Tommy, their father, he had Alzheimer's, he had diabetes, he had kidney failure. He had a lot of things going on, and he was also very willful. So we often had a battle of wills, but gradually, the house is huge. It's like 3,000 square feet. So I was suggesting things like, we need to know where he is. When he gets up and wanders, we need to be with him so he doesn't fall. Well, eventually we got a paging system with motion sensors, and each motion sensor in each location made a different sound through the pager. So we all were on 24/7 night shifts and day shifts. And, there were times I was the one getting up at night and being with him when he went to the bathroom. I was the one that got up one time before we were doing all that and waking up Tony, the brother, saying, your dad's trapped in the bathroom. He can't get up. We were all dealing with it. A lot of stuff.
Wow.
And I had my thyroid removed in 2009. And I realized there was a certain point in all that where I said, okay, I can't do night shift anymore, because it meant getting up every time that pager went off. And it was sometimes 2 times a night, but it ended up getting to more like 5 and 6 times a night.
Oh my goodness.
Because he was dealing with sundowners, and he was waking up thinking it was daytime and all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
And he was falling more, but they trusted me. And I cannot say enough about what a privilege that is, to be trusted.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
To be trusted like that.
Wow.
So, and I still am here. I'm here because I really like even more who I've become and who I'm becoming in the process of how we all share and how we all live together.
That's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it is. I mean, I call it an alliance. It's an alliance, especially that Des and I have. And I like who I've become. And I may not have become who I am now if I hadn't put myself in this setting and in this situation.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's amazing. And I'm hugely grateful. I really feel that um, gratitude is another major tool, forgiveness is another major tool. And I feel sometimes like many of us have already shifted into another dimension
Yes.
where we are dealing with various things that we're dealing with, but we get the opportunity to choose which radio station, which frequency do I want to be on? You
Wow.
know, do I want to be on the one where the media feeds us what they want us to know? No, I've had enough of processed food. Thank you very much. I don't want that for my brain. We were just watching the Aretha funeral, and I kept saying, I don't want to be listening to the stations where they tell me what they want me to know. I want to listen to it live. I don't want anybody to digest my food or, what I'm hearing. I want to hear it myself.
Right, right. Wow, that's so true. And a lot of people, even when you think you're awake, there's levels to it. So I think sometimes you think, oh,
Oh,
okay, I've learned it. I know, I'm awake. No, there's always more.
there is. And I just took Candace's BQH, Beyond Quantum Healing course. And I think I'm still in some kind of a state from going into this course, because at one point I was I was writing to her about how, I don't agree with some of these answers for these quizzes, and she said you can change them, and I was like, I didn't find a way to change them. And then I went to something where she was talking about right and left brain, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to just sink down into this right brain experience. And I I think that's where I still am, because I think that this kind of place, or this kind of freedom of what Candace has put into this course, I think this is really more of where we all live, and this is the kind of work that you're doing. This is where this is bringing more of to light where we live, not only where we have lived, but who we really are. And there's so many times that we're out there in the world, we're being busy, we're saying what we think we need to say, we're playing these roles, we're wearing those uniforms. But I remember so many situations where I was struggling because people weren't asking, you know, for where I was really living, and there'd be these questions, like the questions on the test that say, is it A, B, C, D? And I would think, my answers aren't there. Is it A and B, or A and C, or C and D? And I would think, no, my experience is not there. Well, this kind of BQH is, where do we really live, and what's really in our hearts, and um, and to come more with integrity from that place of who we really are now, not just after death or between lives, but now, So wow, I
We're,
would say to anybody, take BQH, take BQH.
yeah, I think it's very, it brings you back home to yourself.
It
It's your
does.
authentic you. And what I've realized is when I'm doing sessions, it feels like you're communing with source, like you're going to church, but like you're visiting yourself, and there's this level of like everything's gonna be okay. Like
I
it
keep
reminds you.
Yeah, it does. I find myself using the word trust more than faith. Trust feels to me like such a more intimate kind of
Yeah.
something, and it involves that team. And yeah, I get so many different images. Sometimes I feel like I'm holding on to some kind of like like a webbing and a ring, and all these teammates of mine were all, and there are some behind me, and there are some, they're all holding on to the ring, and we're all moving. And it's kind of like, okay, or sometimes I'm in a pool and I'm holding on to a raft, and I'm like, and they're telling me, okay, we're going for a ride, you ready?
Wow. Yeah, you're always held. You're
Always.
always being held. And I
Yeah.
think that we forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were talking about trust, that's what I have. I have this stone that says trust.
Oh, good
And
for you.
that's so funny that you said that. It's true. I think it all boils down to that. And that is the biggest gift and help we can give to ourselves is to trust.
Is to trust. Yeah, to trust, and to take myself out of the way. I used to not like it when people said that, but yeah, literally to say, okay, I'm letting go. I mean, how can I receive if my hands are full?
Yes.
If I'm holding on, and when there's something I don't like, it's like, well, what do you want to be holding when the music stops? You playing Pass the Shoe, or past we used to play that when we were little, or playing musical chairs. Where do you want to be when the music stops? Well, I don't want to be holding a hot potato,
Right.
so
Right.
if I don't like it, I need to just let it go, and because if I hold on to it, I'm putting more energy into that. That's the thing about the dimensions, or yeah, the being in another dimension. I think the rules are different. I
Wow.
think I
Yeah.
really think the rules are different. That's some of what I feel like I'm really learning. I used to not really understand the whole thing of timelines, but um, if we don't want to invest in the older ways of doing things, well, that's okay. We don't have to, do the same things maybe to shift out of stuff. We just need to, be clear with ourselves and say, oh, okay, all right, I'm ready to let that go. And wow, the other thing I think is we need to be slightly willing. We don't even need to be totally willing. I think that when we're
Wow.
slightly
Yeah.
willing, the angels and the guides, they're like, oh, she's willing, even a little. I
Yeah,
remember,
that's huge. You're
isn't
right.
it?
Yeah. Yeah, and they Dolores talks, or Julia Cannon talks about that in the quantum healing hypnosis class. She says that a lot of left brain people want to dominate the experience, and I'm very type A personality,
Mm-hmm.
control freak to the max.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that experience too, where, oh, this is stupid, this is silly, and judging crap out of everything and thinking I'm making it up. But that's my ego, my conscious brain taking over.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, all you have to do is step a little out of the way and let them come in, and they'll just swoop in. All they need is a crack. And I remember her saying that.
It's
And
true.
like allowing, just allow a little bit. So how funny that you said that. It's so true.
Well, I saw light perception technically until I was 19. And I remember thinking that I was very dependent on it. And I could see lines on parking lots, I could see lines on the TV screen, I could tell whether somebody was in front of me. I might not know, well, or something. I might not know if it was a tree or a person, but if they were wearing white, I could see the light coming from what they were wearing. And I remember thinking, oh, hearing about people that had their eyes removed and thinking, oh God, oh no, and I'd walk into a room and there'd be other blind people and they wouldn't have the lights on. And I think that was strange. But then my eyes deteriorated and they got very painful, very thin. And I said to the doctor, you know what? I don't want this pain. Take them out. And I was freaked out, wondering, but it does not look dark to me. It does not look like I thought it was going to look. I still feel like I'm seeing light, and I get light patterns in different ways. And I think that's still coming to me. But also, they tied the muscles around the eye muscles around silicone, and then they make a painted shell out of acrylics and plastics, and so that fits over the muscles that are wrapped around the silicone implants. So I would, tease and say, yeah, I have silicone implants, and and I've got my eye out for you, and all kinds of ridiculous, funny stuff. But I remember seeing I would watch the light. I would watch the light from the street lights. And I remember one night somebody took a picture, and I swear I saw the moon. But I remember watching also, I saw lightning a few times, and I would stare at the light as it shined on the lake where we used to go a lot, and on the ocean. I would stare at that. And then when the light would pour through my bedroom window and it would shine on a place on the floor, I would stare at that. I was just enthralled with that. So I remember knowing that when it was dark, it looked one way, but if there was a crack in the shade, or a crack, the shade being pulled up, because I would go and pull up the shade to see if it was morning, and I would see the light. And if there was a crack in the shade, or in the window, or a light streaming into a room, I knew that it made a huge difference. So that was very real to me, to get that image that, wow, a little tiny bit of light can make all that difference.
Wow.
And I don't think God makes us grovel. I don't think God tests us. I don't think God punishes us. I don't think any of that. I think we're hard on ourselves.
Right.
But that little crack will, if we're willing, I really think they are more than ready. They are eager, waiting for us to help us and work with us, and away we go, just from that little tiny bit of light that can come in, or that little bit of willingness from us.
Yeah, and you know how they say, oh, we're really powerful, but I think that we forget or don't realize. And I think the power, the number one or the biggest power, is choice. That's your power. You can decide something, and you can change your mind. That's a huge superpower.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people are afraid of changing their minds. I remember when I was in therapy, and I said to my therapist, I'm really glad it's okay with you if I change my mind. And she said, well, that's why we're here, for you to change your mind.
Wow. Wow, that's true. That's the business of therapy, isn't it? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, but really, and it takes less energy to do it than it does to procrastinate and be in fear. It really takes less energy
to
do it. It's amazing. And that day, like I said, where I was choosing what I didn't want rather than what I did want.
Wow. Yeah, you put all the gasoline on like you said, energy, all of it in the side of, or even looking at something in a pessimistic way, or looking at everything you don't have, but look at what you do have. What do you have? And appreciate that. And then you start to think like, wow, I've done pretty well. Like thus far, as guided as I thought that I was, not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And, with what I said, in case anybody's wondering, with what I said earlier about all those fears I had of sounds and stuff, one day it came to me, that just belongs to a past life. And I went, oh, okay. And it went away.
Wow.
The fear went away. Yeah. Isn't that incredible? I mean,
so it just wants to be acknowledged?
Huh?
It just wants to be acknowledged? Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. I think acknowledged and just put into its container, given a place. And then I wasn't scared or bothered by all that anymore.
Wow. And I used to think, I think there's probably levels and degrees of this, but I thought that my fear of or anxiety to drive on the highway was related to me dying in a past life, which I believe that is probably to a degree. And I cured that part, but now I'm getting the messages that I'm picking up the energy of those who have passed on the highway. And it's not my fear. I'm picking up their fear, and that blew my mind. Like, what? because it's
Well,
only in particular areas. It's not everywhere.
I think that's very true. I think many people get mad and frightened and they don't realize that it either is something they're picking up from others, or that it's just, it could even be from tons of energy, and it's heat, and so people take that into adrenaline, or
And they
they
think
take
it's
that,
theirs. You think it's
they
yours
think it's
automatically.
theirs. Yeah. Well, I used to do that. I used to do a lot of that. And I think a lot of people struggle with anxiety and depression and all kinds of stuff because they're thinking that, I mean, there are a lot of people that are out there just getting angry at other people. And of course, there's all that mind control stuff. But I really think a lot of it is all the energy that's pouring in, and people don't know what to do with it, and maybe even a lot of them are empathic, and so they're feeling a lot of stuff that isn't theirs, and
Yeah,
like you
and
said.
then you tend to label yourself. Oh, I'm stupid. I'm messed up. I'm broken. I'm
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
XYZ. Something's wrong with me. Like the other day, I woke up perfectly great mood, feeling fine, and then all of a sudden, like I felt smothered with this anxiety and dread, and I didn't know
Mhm.
where it was coming from because logically there was no explanation for it. And then an hour later, I saw the neighbors like honking their horn, really, like, hurry up. And they had overslept and all the kids missed their buses to school. And then I'm like, oh, I was feeling them. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Oh
And then
yeah,
it went
no, that
away.
makes sense. And it doesn't surprise me. You're very, very psychic. And I would imagine that if you're not already doing readings, you would be, doing a great service to others and to yourself to be doing them, because you're highly psychic or intuitive. And so, yeah, I would imagine that you picked up a
But I think a lot, like you said, I think a lot of people out there, because like I said, I thought, oh, I just do that. Everybody does it. So like you think that it's not, what's the word? Like an ability. You think it's
you
your
you
normal.
blame you, yeah, you a lot of people take it into thinking that it's something that's wrong, or something that's they are used to thinking it's a liability rather than an
Oh,
asset,
yeah, that's
you
true.
know you
Yeah.
know but like I've heard all this riffraff about, oh, it's terrible to trust channelers, and it's not real, all this riffity raff stuff. And you know I mean, I don't know, I think there are times when maybe there are channelers and there are channelers. There are people who are reading well, and there are times that I was experimenting and I was not always doing the best things or saying the best things, and I was trying to be impressive and say things that I hoped would make me sound really good, and I really wasn't. I don't think we get anywhere by trying, but I think that we all are channeling the more awake we are, especially, but
Yeah.
even when we're not. I had this insight that it isn't even about having to know when we are coming from a psychic place, or it isn't even always getting to the place of saying, wow, I really think I could go and do readings. I think if we're in the right place at the right time, and we're getting the guidance, or we're doing and saying and being who it is we really need to be, that's as good as it gets.
Right, right. When you're your authentic self.
Yeah.
And I think about the channeling thing, that can
Hmm.
happen with anybody, with anything. Any
Yeah.
information that anybody presents to the world, whether they call it channeling or just speaking your opinion, I think that's where discernment comes in, because
Very much.
my cup of tea may not be yours or vice versa,
Right.
or uh, everybody filters it in a different way. So then you have to decide, well, I agree with most things that you say, but I don't necessarily agree with that.
Well,
And
sure.
that's fine.
Well, we have to use discernment when we're picking products. We need to use discernment when we're moving in and with and through relationships, and we have to. And I mean, I really think, if you want to put it right down to the Christ and the Antichrist, I mean, what is good and what is, quote, evil? Evil is live backwards,
Mm-hmm.
and so, I mean, there are times I think we have to choose between, well, what's healthy and what's healthy for me. I mean, like you said, could be sitting in a group of people that are believing in something, or chanting, or just like with wine, some wine, it tastes great, and some it's like, well, everybody else likes it, but I might not like it, so,
Right.
to have that discernment, I think that's one of the most important things that we can have, is discernment, and to use
Yeah.
that.
And really give ourselves the gift of the permission to
Yep.
say, you know what, that's not for me. And allow yourself to say it. Don't just follow along because, oh, everybody's doing it, or everybody likes him and everybody likes this. So what?
I'm
At-
sure that you've looked back on your own experience, I have, but also you've talked with many a client, and they'll tell you this horrible experience of who they were with or what happened. And you'll ask, did you ever have an inkling early on? Did you ever have an
Mhm.
inkling? And almost always, yes. I'm
Yeah.
surprised when somebody had no inkling. I'm
Wow.
surprised. And maybe they just haven't gotten to it yet. But I think there are those little signs.
Oh, absolutely. I remember saying I do, and in my head screaming, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. Run. Go.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
ever lose any friendships or relationships after you woke up? Was there any purging for you?
I've moved away from a lot of relationships, and then I've gradually gone back and found a way to, I guess, just still love and embrace them. I've had other people not want to hear anything I have to say. I mean, I've really, really, I didn't have, the rest of my family, they're all really close, but they're not my blood family. My sister was adopted. She and her kids and her husband are all very, very close. And I think today we all have a really good foundation of mutual respect and appreciation of each other, but we don't spend a lot of time together. We just are into very different lives. I She went on and found her natural family, and her mom had already passed, but she found her siblings, and that was very heartwarming, and it was a little sad for me, because my nieces were like, oh, finally we found our real family. And you
Oh,
know
yeah.
I always knew that they didn't want to hear much of what I had to say, and they used to get mad at me when I would stand up for myself, because I wasn't going to take a lot of the what I would call limiting beliefs. They didn't like it when I felt that I knew what I was talking about, or they didn't like, and the psychic kinds of things that I would share. Or they didn't like. They really are on different pages spiritually, but it's okay. I think really today, all that being said, I just think there's much more appreciation and much more love that is between all of us. But as far as I mean, people that went away from me because of what I believe, probably there are a lot of people who shake their heads and go, I have a play name. I call myself Woo Woo Wacky Witch Hazel, and I spell woo woo WUWU, and I say it stands for Wonderful Universe, Wonderful You. And for years I had people call me Witch Hazel, playfully, or call me Hazelnut or whatever. But some one day I decided, okay, I'm going to be Woo Woo Wacky Witch Hazel, and so. I know there are people who seriously don't deal with woo woo and think that just don't want to have anything to do with me because of all the things that I believe in that are different from what they believe in, and that's okay. it's just,
Right. To each his own.
yeah, I don't really, I mean, do I think I was a witch? Ooh, yeah, maybe, because God Almighty, I know what it is to be afraid of having, being burned at the stake. I know what it is to have that kind of fear. But I think I'll tell people, I'm the good witch. I'm a good witch now. It's
Right.
all
Yeah. And what does witch
all about
mean,
good.
really?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's rituals. That's all it really is. But it's
right.
how anything can be used in a bad way, like a knife can make a meal or it can kill someone.
Yeah. Um, what did I decide? I decided recently that I decided that which stands for what if trust can help?
Wow.
What if trust can help? Because a lot of my questions that I ask myself and that I ask others are questions that produce a sense of either wonderment or possibility. What if something else is possible? What if something else can shift? I'll ask things like, I love wonderment, who put the wag in the dog's tail, you know, and things like that. I mean, it's just things that keep me in that state of wonderment.
Right.
Is just wonderful, and I guess that's what I really strive to convey to others.
Wow. Yeah. And oh, that's so beautiful. That's so empowering. And by universal law, the
Mm-hmm.
opposite has to exist. Just you even conceiving of it makes it exist
Yeah.
automatically, because you
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to think about it if it didn't already exist somewhere.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it just allows for that crack of in the door, for that light to come in. It allows for that little extra bit of possibility. There was one time I took access bars, access consciousness, I think might be what it was called. I think it was Gary Douglas that did that. I get him mixed up with Gary Craig, who did emotional freedom technique. But anyway, access bars, and the two questions that are asked in that I still love. One is, what else is possible? And the other is, how could it get any better than this? How
Wow.
could it get any better than this? And now, what if it's already really great? But if you remember to ask, how could it get any better than this? Then there isn't, it isn't sealed in. It doesn't become a limit to be where you are. There's always that further possibility. Or if things are not going well, how can it get even better than this? Then it's not hanging on to how bad it is. And I always envision, when I hear that question, I think of a circle of chairs, and all of a sudden somebody else wants to come into the circle. And so, people will say, wait a minute, we got to find room for somebody else. So everybody move back a little more so we can get another chair or two into this circle. And that's what that question does for me. It allows for everything to move, to create just a little bit of space.
Wow. And it's hope. It's hope. You're introducing hope. You're cracking the window shade to let light in.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that are just waking up, or anybody that may be struggling right now with all this energy?
Well, I think we've given a whole lot today, but I'm excited about living in the unseen, because I really believe that that's where spirit is. Spirit manages to manifest a lot in the seen, but it all comes out of the unseen. It always was in the unseen before it came to the seen. And so I really am, I want to encourage people to trust, and to trust in that, and trust in life beyond the five senses, trust in life beyond the day-to-day, beyond what, the processed food. I mean, I tell people, I think one of our biggest challenges is over-processed food and under-processed emotions. Well, we get over-processed information, So listen within and take what you like and leave the rest. But leaving the rest doesn't mean you never come back to it. You just, I like Shane's unbiased and on the fence. I used to think I wish he'd get off the fence, but really, unbiased. It's good to be unbiased. It's good to just consider. It's good to be on the fence. It's good to be in a place of unattachment to a lot of things and open enough to just consider possibilities and using discernment and knowing that it can change on a dime. Things can change in a heartbeat, in a flicker.
Yes.
So if you don't like it, change the frequency, change the station, and trust that if you don't know how to do that, ask. Trust your team to do that with you and for you. Ask, say, I don't know how to do this right now. I don't know how to walk through this. I don't know what to say or how to make sense of this. Or I don't know how to feel more patient right now. Or I don't know how to find this or that. And just trust in the angels, guides, whoever, whatever they are. It is trust. Ask and trust.
Wow. Yeah. And then when you're neutral, it's like you're at a buffet and you have all the choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's more power.
Well, yeah, because then there's room for possibility. There's so much room to try new things. I just lost close to 30 pounds on Weight Watchers.
Wow.
And I am super excited. I'm down into a size 12 now, and I was beginning to think I was about ready for plus size. So
congratulations. That's amazing.
And thank you. And I'm thinking about interesting food combinations always in new ways. I'm thinking about and I'm eating things very differently and thinking about, gee, I haven't really done much with cabbage. Maybe cabbage is something, maybe eggplant, I'm going to do more with that, And so I'm experimenting, and that's that kind of place of, okay, I'm neutral. What else is possible? And how can I turn this into a wonderful occasion, So,
wow. Yeah. And seeing things like from the perspective of a child, wonderment.
Yep.
And curiosity and experimentation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep.
And that's what makes life worth living. And then you discover amazing things like that.
Oh yeah, it really, Jesus apparently said to become like a little child. So what does that mean? To be childlike, not childish, childlike,
right.
There's wonderment and play,
Right. And joy, appreciating. And you know what children do, even in watching my children, they trust. They just trust. They just know that mommy's going to have food ready. Mommy's going to take me. Mommy's going to take care of this. Mommy's going to figure it out. Mommy's going to protect me. They just trust that. It's not even nothing contrary to that ever enters their mind. And that's fascinating to me. Like, wow, that's how I need to be.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember one time thinking, okay, Jesus had all the tools and equipment. Everything was given to him on loan. He had everything he needed. And, maybe I need to live that way, just trusting. And one of my favorite phrases, I'm not sure. I think Florence Scovel Shinn said this. She's one of my favorite metaphysical writers. Florence Scovel Shinn, lots of books by her, but the Game of Life and How to Play It is the first one that I read, and I read it, I don't even know how many times, probably hundreds of times.
I think I have that. I have it.
One of my favorite titles of hers is Your Word is Your Wand. I love that phrase, your word is your wand. But I think somewhere she said, I am financed by God. I don't know if she said that, but I use that a lot. I am financed by God when I'm concerned about my supply and about money and all of that. That's what I say.
Wow. How funny that you said that. I say God's my boss when
okay.
I use that a lot, and I didn't even know
I work for
where that
God.
came
Yeah.
from. I work for God. God's my
I
boss.
work for God. Yeah. I work for God. I like it. Yeah, absolutely. And,
Wow.
and that implies the God out there where, but it's not necessarily. I mean, the God within, the God that's everywhere, in everything, in everyone. We didn't talk about this much, but in 2014, I was at a Master Charles Cannon spiritual retreat, and one of the things that came to me was that it was just meditation. But one of the things that came to me was that my biggest challenge in this life was being in a body. And it suddenly made sense out of a whole bunch of stuff about violation and violence and sexuality and I think our bodies are a vehicle for our expression and our experience. But and I can imagine being eager to be physical. Oh, come on, let's go do all this groovy stuff and make it real in the physical. I can imagine being that way, and yet, oh man, what do you do when you come in and you're in a box and you're handled by, strangers? And what do you do when you come home and you're handled a lot and you can't see people coming toward you? And what do you do when people start doing things to you or for you, and where there's violence? And how do you sort all that out? Well, it's been a lifetime, it's really been a lifetime. But when I got that particular clause of, hey, it's about being in a body, and wow, that means that there was a time that I wasn't, and there's a time when I'm not, and that gave a much larger perspective for a whole lot of experience.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Well, it's just all part of the journey, all part of the journey.
Could you share your book titles with us?
The first one was a book of daily affirmations called The Courage to See. And I was working for Health Communications at the time, and they insisted that I put it into the context of something related to abuse. I wanted it to be like daily affirmations for personal growth or something. No, so it's daily affirmations for healing the shame within. And the second one is a workbook called Solving the Self-Esteem Puzzle, a guide for moving from PIECE to PEACE. So that's a workbook. And so the first one came out in 90 and the second one came out in 91. So they're not in print. There are used copies here and there. And it's like, what, 28 years since? No.
Wow.
Yeah, 28 years since. 28, 27 years since I wrote those. And, I'm sure that, I mean, I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with myself about everything anymore. I've changed a lot. And yet there were times when I was writing, particularly The Courage to See, that my stepfather was getting ready to die, and everything became much more spiritual in what I was writing. But then I said, we need to shuffle a lot of what was written when, because I don't want it looks like a very different book, from the front of it to the back of it. So things got, shuffled around, but it's 28 years later, and wow.
Would you want to rewrite them and reprint them?
I've talked about it, and I've got another one that I've started, but I just haven't finished to date. But I think if I do come out with another one, I will resurrect those. I think then it would be really good too. Yeah.
Yeah, because those two sound really good.
Well, thanks. And that title, The Courage to See, that was another thing that just dropped into my head, that just came to me.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful title.
Yeah. And other blind people got mad at me, like, oh no, feminists, blind people got mad at me, like, oh dear, why are you using that? And blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, to me, we all have that capacity for more inner vision. Vision is in the mind. And so the courage to see from within, to use that inner vision, I mean, that's really, oh man, that is just where it's at. People say, I see what you mean when you're on the phone. where do you see it? In your mind's eye. That's
Right.
where it really counts.
Right.
So
Where you
yeah,
can conceive of it.
yeah. I mean, I could have probably called it the courage to wake up. That's what seeing is: the courage to see, the courage to dare to, see more of what's true, what's real,
What's possible.
what's possible. Absolutely, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Did you want to add anything else that I didn't ask you? Or how can people get in touch with you also?
well, I have an outdated website, but it does have contact information there. I really, really need to update the pictures there, the a lot of things. I have a web administrator. I used to write my own website in HTML, but then he said, "Let me do it for you." Well, everything takes a lot longer. DebbieHazelton.com is my website. I have a YouTube channel, and I have 3 radio shows. Um, they are on acbradio.org. There's a talk show that I'll probably use some of this for. That talk show is called On the Inside Track, Defining Moments from There to Here.
I love that.
I love that title too. There are 2 music shows. Monday, the Good Energy Mix at 11 a.m. Eastern on ACB Radio Interactive. In the Quiet is a Tuesday night show that's more meditative with spiritual messages, and that is on at 7 p.m. Eastern on ACB Radio Interactive. And then that particular show is also on 9 other stations
Wow.
that I think are still listed on my blog at debbiehazelton.com. And I have a podcast there that's soon to be resurrected, 2 that are going to come under one, because I'm striving to get my own radio station up that that will be for music and spiritual kinds of things. And then the podcast is going to be all under the Heart Connections banner. So that'll be coming around. I do have an announce list. If you want to be on my announce list, send an email to announce-request@debbiehazelton.com. You can also find me on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/IAM Deb MH. I think that's my Facebook, and Twitter @Debbie Hazelton is my Twitter. So
Wow, you're a busy lady.
oh, that's what I struggle with. I am, but I keep wanting to have more space around my time, to not overcommit, to keep more time to just rest and be, and not be too busy. So yeah.
Especially during this time. And what
Yeah.
about the BQH? Are you doing sessions?
I'm not yet. I really am thinking about it. I'm wanting to do some here, and I have some people that have expressed interest, and the house is so big, but I still have to figure out where I want to do it, because I want them to be able to be reclined, comfortable, and then if I decide to do it online. But I know that whether I am doing that or am going to do that, I know there are other things that I will do with ideas I have about scripts and about just the language of suggesting, the language of possibility, the language of inviting other people to have experiences that, can happen again in a flicker. So I think, yeah, BQH has just definitely been with all the things I've done, it still has been such a game changer in a heart opening kind of way. And so I just know that's where we're going more. And yet, as time goes on, we may not need to be doing BQH sessions. We may be just all being more open, but still coming from those places of where we really live. So
Right. It's a good like arrow in the road of
absolutely. Oh, it
right.
gives
so much permission to be safe, to be spiritual, to come from the place of the metaphysical. I mean, I just think Candace has done a wonderful job of bringing so much that's been happening to bring it forward and bring it together into the course that she created. So I just think it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and it's very empowering, and it shows you, it kind of piques your curiosity as to what's possible. And wow, how limitless we really are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope more people start coming to you, because I know you're ready to do sessions, like you've been doing them like crazy and getting some incredible answers, you know.
So fun. It's just fun. It's just interesting to live in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure
Well,
is.
thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing your story. It's fascinating. And I love all of your advice, and you're just so clever, and I love you so much. And I hope that everything that you've shared will help somebody. I know it will. So
thank you. I send you tons of love and appreciation, and much love for everyone. And I know this got really long, but I very much appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
thank you.
All right.